We are talking Day of the Beast from 1995, and this is a Spanish horror comedy, and it focuses on this priest who believes he has found the date where the Antichrist will be born, and it's going to be in Madrid somewhere in Spain, but he doesn't know quite where it will be. So he travels to Spain to try and invoke the devil by doing a lot of crimes and, sinning to try and lure the devil into revealing the location of where the Antichrist will be born. Along the way, he encounters a couple of other characters who kind of end up in a roundabout sort of way becoming his kind of allies, this kind of heavy metal kind of rock sort of shop owner who is a bit of a dummy, but it ultimately is the kind of the muscle, and a kind of a TV psychic who is a little bit more experienced in the ways of the occult and things like this. So the three of them do this kind of satanic ritual, and they do see something, and this kind of spurs them on to try and save the world by stopping the Antichrist from, growing up and taking over the world and all that good stuff. Along the way, there's various kind of hijinks and chaos that ensues. What will happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So let's discuss. Now, this is a 1995 movie, but in a way it feels more like a sort of 70s movie in some ways, in the way that it's kind of filmed and this kind of weird sort of gritty sort of style that it has. The movie has a lot of themes in it, so let's talk about what I think works. The movie, I think, is quite an interesting movie in the fact that it's quite original in many ways. It has quite a dark storyline when it's all said and done. There's these fascists that are going around setting people on fire who they deem as kind of trash, and like homeless people or immigrants and things like this. There's a variety of kind of deaths. There's a kind of a shootout in a Christmas parade, and people die. There's something, even a baby that gets killed and things like this. But at the same time, there's kind of like wacky hijinks and this kind of farcical storyline where this trio of protagonists getting in more and more trouble and getting more beat up as the story goes on, when they're trying to kind of find out if and when this Antichrist is going to turn up. Along the way, the movie, I think, is quite clever in the fact that it never really confirms if what they are doing is real or if it's just imagined, because they, as part of the rituals, they're taking acid and things like this. So it could just be a bad trip, but it kind of suggests that they're all seeing the same thing, so maybe it isn't and stuff. So I think the movie has this sort of these interesting themes that are kind of wrapped in both kind of horror and comedy. And this is an example of where I actually think the horror and comedy sort of works, because the movie does have these kind of wacky sort of comedic energy with it that in any other film would seem like it's some sort of slapstick spoof. But because of the sort of the dark subject matter and our priest character, he's kidnapping people, he's kind of assaulting them, he's kind of trying to kind of draw blood from innocent people. So and he's all doing it in quite an earnest fashion. So it's not like it's played for laughs, but for example, our heavy metal guy is the sort of the more overly comedic version of the character, and the characters, and a lot of the comedic moments come from him, but obviously a lot of it is just the situations that they're in and things like this. So I think the movie actually is a good example of actually sort of blending horror and comedy, and sort of being somewhat successful in both, being both like somewhat, I don't know if I would say disturbing movie exactly, but certainly one that I think has definite darker tones, but also being quite comedic at times. So, although I would say maybe it never excels or, it hangs its hat in any one particular direction, it's a good example of being reasonable, at least in kind of both of those sorts of categories. And I think the characters, although maybe not particularly likeable, I think are quite interesting and watchable because they're so sort of manic. All three of our main characters really have this kind of a different type of energy from each other and come across as sort of, quite interesting characters in their own right about what's actually kind of going on, what's their kind of mindset, because some of it just feels like quite bizarre at times. Like our kind of heavy metal guy, for circumstances that will happen in the movie, his mother gets killed and he just sort of brushes it off, and he just seemingly very in awe of this priest and things, and the priest seems absolutely committed to the cause without any kind of thought on its own. That the occultist guy is a bit more sort of takes a while to kind of get convinced and things, but when he does, he's all in. So I gotta say, I think there's some interesting stuff going on with the kind of the characterization. I think again, it's harder to sort of really determine whether a foreign language movie is maybe the best acting, but it certainly seemed sort of earnest enough. So that was all pretty good. And as I said, the general sort of story, I've got to say, is quite compelling. It gets a little bit chaotic, especially I would say in the third act. But nonetheless, I was kind of quite intrigued to sort of kind of see where it would end up. And as I say, I think having these different elements in it, this kind of like a little bit of commentary about the state of 1995 Madrid and how, there's all this kind of urban decay kind of going on, and then there's the rise of fascism and stuff. Along the same time, you've got spiritual elements like the kind of the end of the world, biblical sort of ramifications and stuff. There's a fair amount going on with this movie, I have to say. What doesn't work in this movie, as I said, it kind of gets a little chaotic as the film goes on. In a way, although I think the movie is somewhat successful in, marrying that comedy and horror, it's a sort of ends up being a little bit of a jack of all trades but master of none. So I think this movie could have been a genuinely kind of like gripping and scary like drama or horror, where it has deep dramatic tones and this kind of this sense of real danger, but it doesn't because of the kind of the comedic elements. At the same time, it never like fully commits to the comedy, because there is still a seriousness about the proceedings that are happening. So again, although the movie has some amusing moments, it's never an outright comedy. It's much more of like a dark satire and stuff, but never like an out-and-out spoof where it kind of borders on that sort of line at times. And then to mention, the characters aren't particularly kind of likeable. And I have to say as well, the character of our priest doing this, these kind of sins, seems a little sort of, I don't know, it doesn't really seem to really accomplish very much. He's keying cars and smoking and petty theft and stuff like that. It doesn't really feel like it's this is the way to the devil. And you would have thought someone who is a learned priest who has apparently been studying this, he would kind of do the deadly sins or something like that, and that kind of stuff. Or there would be a little bit more of a plan in place in a way when you consider we're meant to believe he's been studying this for all this kind of time and things. I mean, again, maybe the movie doesn't take itself particularly seriously and it is more played for comedic effect at times. But again, I think there are elements here that the movie kind of, I don't know, it felt like missed opportunities in a way. The film is still interesting, but I think as the film does go on, you feel like it loses some of its focus and ends up being more chaotic at times, and ends up being a little bit more kind of more slapstick as the sort of the film goes on, and the kind of the comedy threatens to sort of somewhat kind of overturn any dramatic chops that the film might have. Overall, though, it's certainly an interesting movie and something somewhat original, I would say. And in some respects, I think it feels like an older movie in the way that it's filmed in 1995, but also at the same time, I think the movie's quite forward-thinking in many ways. But it's a bit of a mixed bag. But overall, I think the positives make this a above-average movie. Although I do think there are some elements here that I think could have been better realised, and you know, there could have been a better movie come out of it ultimately, but it's still a worthwhile watch if you don't mind some chaos and some poignancy in there at the same time, and with mixed in with weird humour. It's a 6 out of 10 for me. What were your thoughts on it? If you've seen it, please let me know, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.